Morning, everybody. Oh, geez, that seems loud. I apologize to the people in the back that I've just scared. Bear with me today. This is the first opportunity I've had to chair this meeting. So I'm putting the disclaimer right out there at the beginning. Please be patient, but we'll try to get through it as quickly as possible for you all so you can get on with your day. So today's meeting is being hosted on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nations and the Comox Waste Management Service, located in the Coast Salish, bear with me here, Kawakawak and Nuchalnush, shot territories. So we're going to call the meeting to order and approval of agenda. Changed. Sorry, yes, we're amending the agenda. We're switching number 3 to the number 2 spot and number 2 to the 3 spot.
The agenda is amended.
Thank you. Second discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, no in camera, no adoption.
Minutes.
I don't even have to do anything. This is great. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Hearing none, carried. No new business. We can just skip that. Petition and delegations. We do have one, do we not? No, we do not. Oh, it'd be a presentation. I apologize. Reports, Strathcona Waste Management Advisory Committee.
No minutes.
Do you need me to announce who seconds and first?
If you like
For the people on, okay. So just for today, if you could do me a favor, when you first and second, can you also say your last name too, please? Arbor, thank you. Okay, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Analysis of the tax, sorry, I lied. We're going to number 3. I apologize. Look at that, I already made a mistake. The CWSM 2022 Community Education Summary Program, 2023 Program and Initiatives. Report date 17th, 2023, regarding the summary of the 2022 Comox Waste Management Community Education Program outcomes and the 2023 program initiatives for receipt. Thank you.
Second, Arbor.
Thank you. Discussion?
And Mr. Chair, at this point in time, I can introduce staff and we have guests that will help provide a presentation for you and the board. And once that's done and all the questions are asked, then you can vote on receipt at the end of discussion.
Perfect.
So I'll introduce you to Vivian Shaw, our Senior Manager of Solid Waste, and she will help lead us through this presentation.
Perfect. Thank you.
And you just need to press.
Thank you, Russell. Through the chair to the CSWM board. Good morning. This report here is the summary of the 2022 CSWM community education outcomes and also our initiatives for 2023. Before I get started, though, I just wanted to introduce our team that's here today to present. Jesse Lee, our manager of CSWM operations. He's got a big portfolio. He's responsible for the safe, efficient, effective, and environmentally compliant operations of all of our CSWM facilities. So that's the solid waste disposal and diversion all across the CSWM service areas. We've got Stephanie Valdell to the right of him. She's the CSWM service coordinator. She's responsible for the management and maintenance upgrades and operational contracts for all of the facilities outside of the landfill in Cumberland. Additionally, she plays a critical role in a number of really key initiatives that we discussed at the last meeting, including the food composting pilot program in the rural communities. So that's Tassis, Savalis, Cortez, and Homofo First Nations. She's also really plays a really critical role in managing the EPR programs across the service, illegal dumping, as well as community cleanups, which she'll get into as part of the Ocean Legacy. Including the successful launch of the Ocean Legacy Depot last June. We also have Lindsay Eason. She is our rural and urban community educator. She plays a really important role in getting that information out to the general community and public. And then moving on to Tina, she is our school educator for District 71, 72, and 84. And we will go into all of those in greater detail as part of the presentation. The report that's before you, in front of you, is, again, it really just outlines the wide range of communication and education initiatives that we have either currently underway and what we have planned for 2023. And these are really integral in achieving our board commitments that's laid out under our commitments and obligations under the solid waste management plan. So without taking up all the airways, I'll turn this over to Stephanie to start off with. We have a presentation for you today.
Good morning to through the CAO to the chair and board. As Vivian mentioned, my name is Stephanie Valdell. I'm the services coordinator for the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Service. I'm happy to give a very quick update on the Ocean Legacy Depot, which is located at the Cumberland landfill. The service launched the Ocean Legacy Depot in June in conjunction with Oceans Day. Since then, we've collected over 14 tons of material, sending over 10 tons to the mainland for recycling. In 2022, staff worked with the BC Shellfish Growers Association, Denman Island Marine Stewards, Quadra Dream Clean Team, and numerous community members to collect, sort, and transport the materials collected within the coastal communities of our service area. This year, the service will focus on working with industry and producers to further divert waste from landfill. The Ocean Legacy is now manufacturing a legacy plastic pellet used in manufacturing of patio furniture, kayaks, boats, and cosmetic containers. The Ocean Legacy Foundation Depot is a welcomed addition to the service, and residents have provided a lot of positive feedback. Thank you.
Hello, also happy to be here. You have in front of you in the report a lot of statistics and information. And so what I want to do today is to share some stories that are as a result of all of that good work. So far this year, I've already seen over 2,500 teachers and students in all 3 districts. I'm just sharing a little feel-good quote there. We're getting a lot of really positive feedback from teachers and students. And you have the numbers from last year, I believe, in the report in front of you. These are the different services we're currently offering out to all 3 districts. And so we have basically the content is very similar, but we make it age appropriate. So for kindergarten to grade 3, I'm doing a recycle relay game. For intermediate up to high school, we do waste audits, which I would say is probably our most powerful with inspiring students to generate action in their schools. Upper intermediate, I'll teach with science classes, social science classes, any teacher that will have us in who wants to talk about waste diversion and social action. And then I also do presentations on with families. So basically I find a way to discuss the content that's age appropriate. And so this is just a breakdown of all the different presentations offered that schools are actively booking. And here's some examples. This was an awesome story out of an Isfeld grade 11 class in school district 71, where I did a presentation on circular economy. I was very happy almost 6 weeks later to get an invitation from the teacher to come and watch students present out the results of that presentation, which was they worked for the whole 6 weeks on circular economy. The posters you see on the right there are students had to pick an item and track the linear nature of the item and how it impacts the environment. And then they had to come up with a more circular way of doing that. So what you're looking at there is a linear map of what happens with cotton socks. And then students brainstorming ways to make that product more circular to reduce waste. And then we all made hacky sacks out of used socks at the end of this. So this is the kind of projects that are being initiated by schools post presentation. And that's why I wanted to share just some fun, inspiring stories. We're still doing landfill tours and are, as of this morning, I believe, fully booked for this school year. This is Jen Ivan presenting to, I believe, a grade 6-7 class. We're in the process, for those of you who haven't seen our first video, I would recommend, but we're in the process of also making another video to speak to students about the landfill. And this has become a general tool that gets sent out to adults as well, but is quite popular. The landfill tour, we have school buses going up to the top of the old landfill site with views. They're exposed to compost, circular economy, recycling, and it's turned out to be a really great program. I'm also still working a little bit hybrid. We learned through COVID times that we were able to deliver some of this online. So I'm meeting monthly right now for with a school in Cayuquit online. I just yesterday, on the right, there's an example of a package that I mailed to them with supplies for the presentation. The teacher manages the classroom on the other end, and I'm presenting. Yesterday, we made t-shirts out of, shopping bags out of old t-shirts that I had mailed to them, and the teacher facilitates that online. We have the students running around the classroom, voting with their feet, we call it. So I would hold up an item of garbage and they would have to vote with their feet and go and stand beside a sign that said recycle, reduce, refuse. And so all of that learning is still able to happen online with the support of teachers on the ground. And the relationship is really building with this community in Cayuquit, where I'll be going in May, and we'll be having a community event, which is one of their school goals. So we're hoping it will also support larger diversion initiatives in the community. Where I'm also newly mentoring schools on reducing their hot lunch waste. We've noticed that PACs, for instance, hold school fundraisers. This is a photo on the right. We didn't have permissions for the faces, but there are some beautiful students behind those white dots. They sent me this picture because they're noticing that we go in and talk about waste diversion, but then every single Friday, every classroom has a stack of pizza boxes from floor to ceiling that go in the garbage. So they sent me this. Because I had gone in and done an audit with them and they saw it. And so I had the opportunity to be invited to speak to DPAC and encourage them to reduce waste for hot lunch programs while still raising money. So again, these are stories about that. This is the result of our work, that students are noticing the discrepancy and they're leading the way. Family workshops also happen. I'm doing one for all of the homeschooling families with NIDES this week or next week, where we'll make waste-free energy balls, like an online cooking class. Of course, before we do that, I do a waste audit in front of them, talk about the landfill. So all of these are stories and education and my sort of in. So this is a fun way of doing it. But we get to do family workshops both in person now and online. And we have students and teachers developing projects like this, which was where we talked about landfills past, i.e. shell middens, Indigenous ancient landfills, landfills present, what's going on at the landfill today, and then what do we wish for a landfill in the future, which their wish was that the landfill would be empty in the future. And so this is another example of a teacher and a student running with the content and making it into something bigger. So the seeds are planted and it flourishes from there. This is a really awesome student who did her capstone project, which is required for graduation, on ocean plastics and waste. And she approached me. I play a mentoring role with high school students. This is actually some netting that we rescued from the ocean legacy bins for her to use to contain this 8-foot-long sculpture of an orca. This orca is made out of trash that she picked up in her own neighborhood. And then she presented a capstone to a board for graduation. And so this was, again, the result of her doing a waste audit, becoming intrigued by garbage. She's going to university for to study oceans and plastic and waste. And so this whale will, we're just waiting for a plaque, and will actually likely live at the Ocean Legacy bin. And we hope to have it here today, but I think it's on display at Isfeld right now. So just another example of something seeded and then becoming larger. And lastly, I think a couple of you might have been at this presentation at Quinish School. Quinish has a Montessori program where students spend 3 years with the same teacher, and so they can do much deeper learning. And 3 years ago, I did a waste audit with this class, and they are fully leading the way in waste at their school. They partnered with Habitat for Humanity and built this station that you see in front of you. They invited electeds and staff to come and learn about what they have created at their school to divert waste. They've generated really high level conversation amongst some of you to troubleshoot and problem solve any of the barriers that the school might be encountering. And so this is their Waste No More. And this grade 5 to 7 class goes around to classroom and educates all of their cohort about how to divert waste in the school. So again, another thing that was seeded by the education program that you lead. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lindsay Eason, and I am the community educator for Comox Strathcona Waste Management. So my goal as an educator is to empower residents to really rethink how they use waste in their homes, to inspire them to make changes so that they actually divert as much as possible, and to make them aware of all the services available within the service area. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so my contract is split into two different areas. I have the urban contract and I have a rural contract. So in my urban contract, last year I talked to almost 3,000 people in person at events. So this is split between attending large community events and setting up an educational booth. Like you can see in the photo there, that was at the Victoria Day celebration in Cumberland last year. So I have, I can talk a little bit more in the next slide about all the parts of my booth display. I also attend home shows in Comox and Campbell River. I host zero waste workshops through the activity guides in Courtney here. I tried in Campbell River and we didn't really have much attendance. And I've attended presentations at senior centers with business groups. I did some outreach for the solid waste management plan to entice people to participate in the survey. And with Stephanie over here, attended community cleanups, and with Tina and some schools actually engaged people in starting up repair cafes. So I'll go through some of these things here. So here's some photos of various events that I attended last year. So when there's a large scale community event happening, I take a booth that includes 2 tables, how to sort waste through a beanbag toss that's really interactive with the kids, and it really helps bring conversations to the table with families. I have a zero waste display that's inspiring people to make changes with some of the everyday throwaway items they find in their homes. And I also have a display about what is actually recyclable. And I've created labels that are stickers that look just like the labels that you see when you go to the depot, so that people can really easily make sure they know what goes where and can set that up for themselves at home. So it's been really fun to work with the community and really connect people with how to best reduce waste at home. You can see on the nautical days display, there's a picture of someone trying to decide what to put in the organics bin. So while I'm at these community events, I do notice Stephanie has all amazingly helped set up waste collection at some of these events where people are able to have large scale sorting areas. However, at the pancake breakfast at Nautical Days, there wasn't a sorting area over there and everything was ending up in the trash. And when I looked in the trash, almost everything was organic except for plastic cutlery and little butters. So I made some signs the next day and set them up and kind of stood there and watched. And when there's signage and it's really easy for people, they do it, right? So it's just trying to tweak little things to make that happen. And then the last photos on the end there are the zero waste workshops that I hosted through the activity guide, which was really fun and inspiring to get people to think about reducing waste over the holidays. So at the home shows, my focus is really on how to reduce construction waste if people are doing renovations, and also just to how to set things up in their home to reduce waste in general. So those are really great ways to interact with qualified people who are really thinking about doing these renovations and how can they do them in a way that's going to be low waste. And I'm set up to go to the home shows this spring in Comox and Campbell River. And the repair cafes have been an amazing way to really engage the community to think twice before they throw something away. And because we're now starting to have them more regularly, I think people are really holding on to stuff to see if they can fix it before just deciding to get rid of it. So on October 15th last fall, Tina and I worked with the Lake Trail Community Education Society through the school to host a repair cafe. And about 70 items came through and 50 of them were repaired. And we just got volunteers. We just put the word out and had volunteers fixing small appliances, electronics, various textiles, lots of general things like gluing and fixing stuff that way. And it was so successful. People were keen to hang on to their things for the next one. So we're hosting one with Cumberland on April 29th. And I think the date was different in your what you guys have in front of you. So it's April 29th now. We are also working with Quadra Island. The Denman Island group is actually going to host one specific to garden tools on April 23rd. And I'm hoping to set one up in Gold River, and we're going to have the Lake Trail one again in October. So this is helping build a culture of reuse and repair, which is really exciting. Now for the rural engagement. Last year, I talked to nearly 2,000 people at community events, markets, doing cleanups and workshops, and setting up a booth at recycling depots in all our rural communities. So a combination of going to where people are already going to go and gather, and then being at a recycling depot, just helping people with questions about specifics and having some zero waste ideas there for them. And there was opportunities out in Zabelos where Stephanie and I went and did some community engagement, and we hosted a workshop there, as well as doing the cleanup at the same time. So you can just see from some of these photos the different opportunities for rural engagement. The bottom right one there, the Black Creek Recycling and Composting Workshop is what I hosted through the Black Creek Community Center. And even though we only had a handful of people attend, they were really engaged, and everyone went home and started implementing things that they learned at that workshop. So it's really great. And I hope to improve the engagement around composting and food waste diversion in all these rural communities this year. And speaking to the regional organics program, as the outreach was happening and as the bins were being delivered, I decided to set up some kiosks in the mall, which some of you probably have seen or saw during January. So I was at Driftwood Mall and Comox Mall and talked to 650 people directly. And it was just really interesting to have those conversations and to see where everybody was from. So about 20% of people were from the rural areas, and they would come up to the booth and really be like, are we getting this? I really would like to put my stuff out at the curb. So there's definitely a want there. 30% of the residents were from Comox or Cumberland, so they already had that service. And some of them, though, weren't fully participating. So after some conversations, they were really on board to put everything in there. And Courtney residents, obviously very excited for this program. Only a couple people left angry just about the limits. And I really worked through that a lot with residents about why that limits are there. And the majority of people were like, okay, totally get it. That's fine. So generally out there, the consensus was it's great. And and there's a need for multifamily, lots of multifamily residents really. So I'm willing to move forward working with you guys on how to engage multifamily and diversion, because there's definitely a need there. So I'm really excited about this year coming up. We're going to focus on the recycling changes that have happened through Recycle BC, making sure everybody knows about Bylaw 720 and the curbside collection programs. I'll be going up to Campbell River and helping residents answer questions in person when their collection starts for organics. We are also looking to host a construction demolition workshop. That date is now changing as per a meeting yesterday, but to really kind of bring in all the players in the construction industry and help work with them to decide how to best divert waste according to Bylaw 720. And then we're going to host more repair cafes, going to be at all the home shows, and then attend lots of community events, markets, festivals, and providing presentations when asked. I've already have some bookings for various community groups. That's all.
Directors, questions, please. Number 8. Mr. Director Arbor.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks, staff. That's definitely department firing on all cylinders in terms of your efforts and the outreach that you're doing and the impacts. Really good to see. And I guess we don't get to dig too much into all the work but we only see once a year as well, usually in terms of community education. So yeah, it was really good to see the outreach that you're doing. So you had the fall fair on Hornby and lots of engagement with different people. And I totally agree with building that culture. And I think that what you're doing is really spot on. And obviously you're putting a lot of effort in all of our communities across the service area to reach out and get the kids excited about it. So my question was actually way back to the first presentation. And I brought it up a little bit at the last meeting. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the ocean legacy and more industrial. And it was really neat that you put a picture of the bench that was built. And I'm wondering, I just have a couple of questions because my long-term vision would be for us to recycle our own plastics in the Comox Valley and maybe into water and sewage pipes and things like that. And so I'm trying, and I know we don't have the scale. I've talked to staff, scale is difficult, but my question around the ocean legacy one is, what processes did they use to create those bench or some of those things? Like, are they processing through Merlin plastic, or is it a small scale facility that could be replicated in the valley? And lastly, maybe before you come to Mike, is I think Sarah or someone else spoke, or Vivian spoke to that last meeting, but if you can update us on agricultural plastic as well, what is our forward strategy around that? That'd be great.
Thank you. So the Ocean Legacy Foundation actually has a recycling depot on the mainland where they collect a lot of the hard plastic, rigid plastic debris, wash it, run it through conveyors where it's chipped and manufactured into a pellet. And so those pellets can then be used in material manufacturing processes to make anything that can replicate dimensional lumber, but they're also using it to manufacture things like kayaks, plastic containers that can then be collected at the end of life and recycled again into the same process, which makes that a circular economy. So that's why it's so important. As far as the agricultural products, we did look into it. Unfortunately, it's not material we can recycle through the Ocean Legacy Depot because that is very specific to coastal community collected materials, ghost gear, and industry related materials. And that funding is provided through the province and the federal government specific to aquaculture and fishing industries. However, we have made contact with Clean Farms and are investigating the possibilities of being able to recycle more agricultural products through a pilot program. So we'll continue to investigate that. And if it does provide to be a fruitful option, we will present that information to the board.
Thank you. Director Wells.
Thank you, Chair. A great presentation. It is very exciting to see how far things have come. And one of your slides there did remind me that a couple of weeks ago, I did attend Quinish Elementary along with co-chair Will Cole-Hamilton and Councillor Ilian. And the students were so excited to be able to display their recycling center that they'd created there and the work that they've been doing for quite some time. I've been starting to do my tours of schools again since that have kind of stopped during the pandemic. But even prior to that, the energy and inspiring focus that these children have on wanting to make sure that they can recycle is absolutely amazing. And of course, they run up against the bureaucracy that they collect all this stuff to be recycled, but there's no pickups at the schools right now, and so I'm sure co-chair Will Cole-Hamilton has brought this up, but really looking to see how we can expedite, especially for the schools where there's all this energy that's pent up right now to really make this happen. Because at the end of the day, the easier we make it, the more successful it's going to be, I think. And I mean, I've spoken previously, I think, about, the loss of some of our centers that we had in our community where people could take things to recycle, and how those, I think we've learned they need to be managed somehow better than what they were before. But really looking forward to seeing how those things might be happening. So I don't know that you can necessarily answer any of that, but again, it was really good to see just how energetic those children were. So I don't know if you wanted to respond.
One of the strategies we've been focusing on with schools is creating a pack in, pack out lunch policy, because it's much easier to be diverting waste at home. It's not always successful. When I go in and do a waste audit with a classroom that's doing that, there's still quite a lot of home waste in the garbage. We're just having lots of conversations about how to troubleshoot this. Perhaps we could pilot it as the barrier is that they're considered ICI, and so they bump up against that. But we have lots of teachers coming up with creative ways to navigate that despite that. But that would be the biggest barrier they're coming up against, is they're, even if they collect the waste and get the students on board, there's often nowhere for them to take it. And so, but student classes are, I'm actively promoting pack in, pack out to troubleshoot that at this moment. And then schools are coming up with their own independent solutions. So more to come, I guess. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. And one of my children does actually work at the recycle depot. So he's actually set up our house with all those different recycle bins. And again, as somebody who believes in recycling, I even found it somewhat complicated that, you sort of think, okay, well, we have this bin, we put all the recycling in it, but that's not the case, where you actually have to have these other ones as well. And I'll just comment as well, just serendipitously yesterday, I was parking near the new express return at the Comox mall in Comox. And there was a line of people. And so I was like, this is great. So I walked up, asked how people were doing, and they could not figure out how to do it. And I think it'll come fairly quickly. It's just the process is you go inside, print off your tickets, go out. You get a code, but then you have to text that code to another thing, and that texts you back a number, and then you enter that number into the thing. So it's a few different steps. And again, I kind of, keep it simple, is I think really a challenge there. I think it'll catch them, but I don't know. And I know that's the return center system. But again, just that simplicity kind of thing.
I think our challenge with education in the schools becomes that in one way, I'm in the schools promoting this culture shift around waste. And so if we don't create the structures for students to have that, the way to do that at the other end, they're calling me on it. They're like, well, you're not practicing what you're preaching, basically. So they present sometimes to the school board to talk about this. So students notice this incongruency that, well, you're in here talking to us about all this, but then there's nowhere for us to put it. So it is a complex. Yeah. The simpler, the better. But students are noticing. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
No, fair enough. And I was lucky to set up the first express at the return center here in Courtenay. And as I mentioned, my kid works there, and so I know the system well. And the fact that there was about 6 people standing there that couldn't figure it out. And then as soon as I sort of laid it out for them, they were like, oh, they get it, but it was still, you'll probably see that there may be a little bit of frustration. So there, I'll be talking to the returner people to see if they can do some advertising to make it a little bit more straightforward or easy to follow. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Sullivan. Oops. Oh, I emptied the list.
If you press it again.
Press it again. 19.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. Just a quick question about if you have a location for the Repair Cafe in Cumberland in April. Okay, thanks.
Oh, look at that. My mic's red. Thank you for all of that information. It was great to see that so much is happening. And in particular, I have a question about the workshops that you're offering on composting in rural and remote areas. I guess I would consider myself to be in one of those areas because I'm from Quadra Island. And what I'm wondering is if there's a plan to offer composting bins, maybe hopefully raccoon-proof bins that would be potentially subsidized or in some way offered to folks who are taking the workshop, so that then there can be that like follow through of composting, or how does that work? I guess the rural composting program.
A moment, please. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. As part of the rural pilot composting program that Stephanie summarized at the end of 2021, there were a number of outcomes from that report. One of the key findings from that pilot program was the need for a community champion to be able to, if it's a, are you talking, sorry, I should just go back. If you're referring to a community compost program, or if it's an individual composting at home type solution.
I wasn't sure what the workshops were about.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for your question. Yes, about the workshops that we did at the Black Creek Community Center, which are a general, I kind of presented 4 or 5 ways to compost that could work for people. So basic backyard composting with like a pallets for people who have issues with rodents and other animals. I did have flyers for Speedy Bin, which is a local company who makes animal proof composting bins. And then they could kind of take it from there and compare all the different options. I also had the green cones that kind of go into the ground where people can put things like pet waste and meat and bones where animals can't get in there. And it can just stay in the ground. That part isn't part of their regular compost. Talked about bokashi bins and talked about worm composting. So I just kind of had examples of all these different options. And then from there, depending on everybody's personal situation, they would decide what could work best for them. And Earth Warriors composting came up as well. I have been talking with Ben from Earth Warriors. So they go around and pick up compost for people. So there are people in the rural areas that do hire their services and set their bins out once a week, and they get picked up that way. And so with this transition to the curbside program, there's for all the multi-family residents and rural residents that want compost pickup, that don't want to do any kind of backyard composting, they are looking at using the service.
Would you like to comment more, Director Mowini? On behalf of Director Mowini, thank you. And Director Davis, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that excellent presentation. It's great to see how things are moving along. I guess we feel a bit left out in our remote communities here, but I would love to see some of those programs come here, like that repair workshop was really interesting. I think we get a lot of uptake, especially considering we have a free store where a lot of things get dropped off that could use repairs. So to educate people more and do a workshop in that, I think would be really helpful. Also, I'd be really happy to see more outreach to our school. So I'm just putting that out there. If you could contact myself or our staff, I'd really appreciate that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we have one more. Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. Dr. Davis just triggered something for me, which is not a recycling depot, something that I think is unresolved, that has seen us go backwards definitely at the Hornby Depot, is that the repair and restore and reuse used to be supported by people just being able to pick stuff, pickers that go to the depot and pick things, and they can't do that anymore due to our policies. I don't know how we're going to resolve that. I don't know if staff have put more of their mind. I know it's an insurance question, but on Hornby, we had a thriving culture around people going to the depot and reusing and restoring and repairing. I went to the depot 2 weekends ago and dropped some stuff off, which I know in the past would have been picked, but now it's just going into recycling. So I don't know if staff has any comments on that.
Jesse Lee, can you provide some insight, please?
Yeah, good morning. Sorry, just curious if you had specific items you dropped off, or because just curious what your.
Oh, apologize.
Oh,
Metal stuff.
oh, metal. Okay.
Yeah, tools and a vacuum cleaner.
Oh, okay. The because anything that's reasonable could, I mean, the free store has been expanded to allow for anything like that that could be marginal. I'll leave it up to Stani and the staff to decide what could be, repurposed or recycled. The metal, there's certain things, but certain things just because it is a huge liability for the safety. Years ago when you used to have that pile, it posed a great risk though. People climbing, I've seen people in flip-flops and shorts and stuff that you've probably seen yourself. So that you're right, it is difficult. If there is reusable items, Stephanie and I were just talking about that in the last few weeks, with Stani, if there's a potential to have maybe a C&D area that we could delineate that you could put reusable, 2x4, not things with nails, but things that could be repurposed. That could be an option to explore, but it is, I'm not sure the vacuum in case. So there is, we have the CISA program and stuff that recycles that. I mean, Stani does allow people to, other than some items can't. Some of the stewardships though, and again, they have restrictions on once it becomes that, as far as scavenging for, computers and stuff like that would be an issue. So try to control that, but I know he does allow the other items for sure to go, hand tools and stuff like that. So as long as they don't pose a safety risk of some sort. So, but yeah, the insurance on the liability back to metal, it's on all our facilities. It's a difficult one just because of the hazard. So thanks.
Thank you very much. And it's also, we're going to move to number 2, please. On receipt first, please. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Now we're going to move to number 2. No, and Arbor for second. Sorry.
thank you, Mr. Chair and directors, and Mark Rutten is here, General Manager, to present this report and the recommendation and answer any of your questions.
Thanks, Russell, through the CEO and through the chair. Got a PowerPoint presentation here to help walk through this report. Before we get started on the presentation, at the last board meeting, Vivian presented the proposed financial plan for the service. And I've asked her to stay at the table here today just to take any questions. Like, we would welcome any questions on the proposed budget. So even though this report is focused on taxation and tipping fees, the proposed budget is still there for review. And if you have any questions about the proposed budget, we're happy to also take those today and dive into those. Most of the feedback, like I said at the last meeting, was related to tipping fees and taxation. So that's the focus of this report and presentation. So there were 3 kind of questions that were asked, or focused areas of the discussion at the last meeting, and that was why the tax requisition, how it came to be and why it was set at 6 million, how it compares to other regions, and then what are some options for possibly reducing taxation and increasing tipping fees, or possibly other options. So first part of the presentation here just focuses on how we got here. So the solid waste management plan that we have now, it was developed in 2011, 2012, and then approved in the spring of 2013. And that plan included a significant amount of capital spending. Regulations were changing at that time. We had 2 landfills that were essentially full or would be full within the next few years and needed to be closed. And we didn't have a lot of money in the bank. So capital costs at that time were projected at $70 million. Organics was also a focus of the solid waste management plan. And later we brought a project into the plan at 17 million. And capital reserves were at minimum levels. We had just completed the first phase of closure at Campbell River and the construction of a large MSE wall to support an oversteepened section of the landfill. And that project depleted the reserves that we had, and we were at minimum levels. The tipping fee had already been increased to $130 a ton. That was in 2015. And that was considered to be the maximum at that time to avoid leakage of the waste out of the service area, to mitigate illegal dumping and those sorts of things. So that's where we were. And we knew that we needed more revenue. And so, staff brought forward a series of reports in 2016 over a couple of meetings that recommended an increase in revenue, and that increase be implemented through taxation. So the board was provided with a couple of different options, but they really were options of the same thing. The recommendation was to go to 6 million in tax, and it was really a matter of how to get there. But 3 different options were provided. One to increase slowly over time to get to 6 million. That would have been over like a 10-year period. Another to get there fairly quickly at $2 million a year. And another to just jump right to 4.8 million for 5 years and then level off at 5.5 million. So you can imagine that there was a lot of debate about this very significant increase at the time. Lots of discussion, debate about the pros and cons. And in the end, the board selected to increase to 6 million and to do it over a 3-year period. And that did happen. It actually took 4 years to get there, but a lot of support by the board to make that significant increase. One thing about the option that was selected was it did result in $13 million of savings over a slower ramp up.
Excuse me, Mark, sorry, could I ask you to clarify? This slide says the tipping fee saved, but it was the taxation increase that saved is that correct?
Yeah, sorry about that. Mistake there. And I just want to say that, it can't be overstated how important and significant this increase was. It's allowed us to, close 2 landfills, and those are expensive closure projects considering the landfill gas systems that are now required and the complete covering of the landfill with an impervious layer. And the construction of a new engineered landfill where every drop of leachate created is treated and then discharged. So some very significant improvements have been, allowed and supported by this increase. But that's how we got there. That's the history. The second part of the discussion at the last meeting really was, how do we kind of stack up against some of our neighboring or other regional districts in the province? And this is always a complicated comparison. Every regional district is different, just like every municipality in BC is different. There's, unique population, unique geography, and just a unique history and evolution of regional district and how they've come to be what they are now. The CSWM region is, I would say when compared with the other regions that are in the table in the staff report that you have, is relatively complex and geographically large. So something to be considered. The table in the staff report does include tipping fee for each of the 8 comparators, and it does include the taxation for each. But a better way to look at it, because of all these differences in population and whatnot, is to take the total revenue required for the solid waste service and divide that by the population. And that gives a metric for, better metric for comparing. So the total revenue for solid waste services divided by the population, and the table includes that, that comparison. The CSWM, this service falls kind of right in the middle. So we're $126 per capita for our total revenue requirement compared to 125, which is the average. You can see in the table that the RDN is quite a bit lower than we are. And I just wanted to to kind of point that out as an example of a very compact population with one landfill for the entire region and one transfer station. And you can see in the table that, that compares to, sorry, let's get it here, compares to 5 landfills, active and closed for our region, and 16 transfer stations. So, just the nature of the region creates these big differences in how the service might be provided. The third part of this report gets into the options for reducing taxation, which is the request that was made by the board. So there aren't a lot of options for getting money for the service. So it's really these 2 main sources of revenue. It's either taxation or tipping fees. And it's important to understand that the tipping fees come from 3 main categories, and that's municipal solid waste, construction waste, and then the industrial, commercial, and institutional waste. Quite naturally, a reduction in taxation is going to have an impact on these other categories of waste and the residents and people that participate in those categories. So just the straight math here, assuming that the same volume of waste comes into the service, a $16 increase in tipping fees would equal a $1 million reduction in taxation. So it gives you an idea of what tipping fees would need to go up by to sort of hold things at 5 million rather than eventually moving to 6 million. Some of the other considerations that are important. First off, on the kind of the pro side is, when taxation is reduced or held as it is now at 5 million, there's going to be an $8 savings for every household in the service area. So it's an easy win. It can be easily implemented, and it has an impact on every tax-paying household. And that's based on a $700,000 assessed value. And that's assuming that we don't increase the tax from 5 up to 5.55 as the proposed budget recommends. But to be considered at the same time as that is that an increase in tipping fees, can have other impacts or will have other impacts. For example, the municipal garbage fees at the landfill will increase. So there's a small increase there, which the municipality will either absorb or pass through to residents in a user fee. Construction and demolition fees will increase, those tipping fees, and businesses will see higher tipping. Like businesses in the commercial sector will see higher tipping fees. Multifamily will see higher tipping fees. So whether that converts into an actual higher rate for users, it depends on what the business looks like and how much handling their solid waste is a factor of their total business. But there definitely is some impact. Another consideration is that tipping fees cannot be tax deferred. And another important consideration is that higher tipping fees drive behavior change. So the example I showed is just the straight math. You can reduce taxation by $1 million and increase your tipping fees by $16 to get that revenue back. But if that $16 increase is enough to have people avoid coming to the landfill or avoid the use of the landfill, then it affects the total revenue. And of course, that's a driver for change. We want people to produce less waste and to take less waste, but it just needs to be carefully managed and considered and as part of a holistic plan. So in the end here, the staff report does does recommend a bit of a pause here. So we do have a fairly large surplus that's coming together from 2022. This wasn't well known at the last board meeting, but now we're starting to get a much firmer handle on this number. So the surplus is quite large for 22. There's an opportunity to hold the tax requisition as is for 23 and to come back to you with a much more detailed and robust discussion at the June roundtable to further present the options, the pros and cons, and just provide better information to this particular topic. So that's what the report recommends, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Oops. We're going to go to Director Arbor, please.
Yeah, thanks. And I was very happy to see the report and the analysis you provided. And I mean, from 3 weeks ago or a month ago, I guess we're managing to identify $1.5 million less in requisition, which will go a long ways at a time where everyone is facing some pretty serious inflationary pressure. So I think this will make a difference in all of our communities if we're able to keep this requisition while not impacting too much the long-term picture. And I think, I mean, wow, Alberni Clearcut is really an outlier. I don't know how they're operating, but 200,000 in the requisition, that's, I'm sure there's a story there that our CEO probably knows really well, but my comment would be, my question really is, to what extent, because staff at the last meeting, when there was a little bit of pushback on us asking to keep the requisition the same, was mentioning that if we move to a more tipping fee model over time, it can create other problems in the sense that as volumes go down through better recycling, maybe our request. To me, it's a good problem, but I know that staff has brought that up. Is this something that the solid waste management process is going to address some of these things? Our advisory group digging into some of these issues between requisition and tipping fees? That's really, I'd be interested to know that for sure.
Yes, and Vivian can jump in also, and Sarah's here too to speak to this if there's more detail required. But yes, the solid waste management plan process is the best place for this kind of analysis, and there will be some thorough financial analysis included there. Looking at the taxation versus tipping fees, considering the constant, very reliable source of income from taxation, to put towards things like debt costs, like reserve contributions, and for those programs that don't necessarily provide revenue, but are very important towards recycling and achieving those goals of the service. So it will analyze the sort of taxation requirement for those things versus the tipping fees that are common for covering operations and for that kind of user fee component. So there will be detailed analysis done as part of that process.
Yeah, thank you. Just as a follow-up and as an opinion this time, just to close off my comment, is I see the tipping fees, especially with the ICI sector and the multifamily, where we're not seeing great recycling outcomes. I see the tipping fee almost like a carbon tax opportunity. I think that if we can shift, because they're not changing behavior, we're still not seeing the level of the construction or even recycling programs at multifamily homes. I think we should just start taxing a bit like the Liberal government has done across Canada. They started, or want to go up to $170 a ton. You're currently sitting at $35 or whatever. I think if we gave the signal to the market that that's where we're headed, we're going to actually start to see much better recycling outcomes in those sectors. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you. And we're going to go to Director Wells, please.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, this is it feels like deja vu. I remember seeing these numbers about 8 years ago or so when I first was on this board and wrestling with those ideas of taxation versus tipping fees. And I I do recall asking about free stores actually in the Comox Valley and was told, don't talk about the free stores because of all the liability issues. But I think, at least in the Comox Valley, we have quite a few secondhand stores and not for profit as well as for profit that handle a lot of that stuff. But my real question is when we talk about the increase of tipping fees, and you mentioned the time required. For me, it'd be good just to have a sense of what that runway looks like. If we pulled the trigger and said, raise the tipping fees, is it something that really it's a year to play out or more, like in how, obviously is dependent on existing contracts, et cetera?
Yeah, I would say it's a minimum of 6 months lead time required, and preferably to be aligned with the start of a year, right? So that's why the June the June roundtable meeting that we've referenced in the staff report recommendation was actually planned for September, but we would bring it forward to June in order to have that discussion and make some determinations around tipping fees so that they could be communicated to the community and to the municipalities and then implemented as part of the 2024 budget.
Okay, and when you say communicated out, do those have to be ratified by communities, or is it if it's done at the board, it's done and
It's done, yeah, but they need time to implement that within their own user rates. And then we have hundreds of letters that we send out to all of the major haulers, letting them know that the tipping fee is going up so they can adjust their business.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay, Director McCall.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks so much for the report. I think it had a lot of good information for the board to consider, and it's definitely helpful in kind of giving us some time to weigh those pros and cons in advance of having a deeper discussion in June. The first question I had was just around the tipping fees in our budget forecast. When we're talking about tipping fees, we are often thinking of the landfill side of it, but we now have organics as well. And something that I wasn't fully aware of when we last met and spoke about this, but in the meantime, the city of Courtenay has done our budget for our solid waste collection. That previously we were, like, the municipality of Courtenay was disposing of all yard waste at a zero cost of tipping, and now there's $110 fee associated with that. So our fees that we're needing to pass on to residents has increased substantially. But I don't really see that flip side of it in our forecast, that there is now a new revenue stream in the service for all this yard waste that was previously had a cheaper way of getting rid of it, I suppose. So I'm just wondering if that is in the forecast, because the forecast is slightly higher than last year, but that also includes the $5 increase per ton. And I'm not aware of exactly what the system was in Campbell River or other municipalities, but do these forecasts take into account that there is actually more tonnage going into the organics collection? And further, are we going to maybe see an update on that forecast when we consider this again in June? Because I imagine we'll have some better information as the organics facility gets moving along.
Yeah, I'll let Vivian take this question just on the details of revenue calculation and how organics has been included there.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question. We did a pretty conservative estimate for the initial first year of the organics program, not knowing really obviously what the uptake will be like, especially for the city of Courtenay and city of Campbell River. And at the time of developing the budget, specifically the city of Campbell River, when they were coming on board, was still in question. So we put together a fairly conservative estimate with roughly about 6,000 tons of material flowing through the organics facility, which is lower than what the modeling originally showed. But again, we'll be able to fine tune it once we have a few months of actual operational data. So going into, we're actually potentially looking at a May roundtable so that we can convene a June forward in order to be able to, if there is any consideration for a tip fee increase so that we can have that 6-month window. But we will have a bit more fulsome detailed analysis going into that May-June roundtable.
Great. Thanks. That's really answers my question. And yeah, if we can dig deeper into that when we revisit this, that would be great. And then the other comment, and again, this is maybe something to add to the discussion in June, that looking at just the tipping fees by waste sector pie chart that was provided in the report, the vast majority of what's received at the landfill is coming through ICI and other household, which I assume is residents bringing their waste to the landfill who do not participate in a collection service from their driveway. And I know that some waste services do charge a flat fee, like a weigh fee at the scale, in addition to a tipping fee, like a $5 per vehicle coming through the scales. And I do think that there is a case to be made for considering that. We have had staffing increases needed because of the volume of vehicles visiting our scales and accessing our bins. And in order to ensure that we are diverting as much waste as possible, those need to be supervised. And to me, if we're ensuring that people are paying for the services that they're using, that includes charging people for the impacts to the service of coming in individual vehicles, and also just the challenges of having buy-in on a collection service in the rural areas, that I think we have to be responsible for ensuring that what we're charging to provide the service at the bins is actually representative of what the cost is. And I think charging a flat fee for weighing would maybe help with that. And yeah, so just wanted to make that comment. I'm not sure if staff have a response or if that's something that has been looked at in the past and there's a reason why we don't do it. But I would like to have a discussion about that at some point.
Yeah, thank you. It's good feedback. And we have a minimum charge at the landfill now. And we're definitely aware that the individual trips by individual vehicles is a major, like it's just a major load on the service. So I think, I can't remember the exact stats, but Sarah did put some work into this kind of in preparation for this report, but we didn't end up including it, not to overcomplicate it. That can definitely be part of the June board meeting, but it's something like 55% of the traffic provides only 10% of the revenue. So there's that to deal with and discuss and present, and there might be some solutions like a further charge or some different minimum charge or something like that.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I'm glad to hear that that is being looked at. And I mean, from what I know of it right now, I would certainly be supportive, but yeah, depending on how that discussion goes, yeah, hopefully we can dive into that a little bit deeper. And then the last question I have, if it's okay to ask 3, Chair.
I'm here all day.
Okay. I don't see any other lights on, so there's some on Zoom though. Yeah, just the other issue that I have with the tax requisition is just that it's not a very equitable way of funding the service, and that the areas that are probably the most expensive to deliver the service are way out in the rural areas where property values are lowest. So, areas that are urban and maybe a little bit cheaper to deliver the service are actually paying the bulk of that tax requisition, which is part of why I think the tipping fee makes more sense, in addition to what Director Arbor said. Same rationale as the carbon tax. We want to drive behavior change with the way that we collect revenues to operate the service. But are there other, in the analysis that you looked at with other regional districts and tax requisitions, are there other ways other than property assessment that regional districts are charging this, like a mixture of frontage and tax, or is or assessed value? Is that the standard, or are there other means of collecting and calculating that fee?
Yeah, I believe assessed value is the standard, but I'll turn it over to Vivian, who worked on collecting that information.
Thank you. Based on the jurisdictional scan that we did in preparation for this report, the taxation versus and combination of taxation versus tipping fee model is what has been the standard way of being able to execute, or sorry, be able to generate revenues for these respective communities. We can certainly take a look at to see if there are any other models, but that's the only one that we're aware of through this jurisdictional scan.
Is based on assessment. They're all based on assessment.
Yeah, assessment value.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, we're going to go to Director Wally online, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My view on this is that tipping fees are a user pay system. It motivates people to reduce their waste. I think after all, that's our overall goal. Whereas on the other side of the coin, requisitions basically subsidize heavy users, subsidize industry. And that to me seems like the more unfair system. And with requisition, there's really no motivation for individuals to reduce the waste that they contribute. Now, I would like to see us increase tipping fees $60 per year into the future until the total requisition is eliminated. And the thought that, well, illegal dumping and the reduction of the waste stream is a problem, I believe it is a red herring. I think the reduction of the waste stream is our target, and that would be a good thing. And if it does reduce our overall revenues to meet the cost of running this operation, then we would further increase tipping fees to make up for it. I believe also that operating costs would certainly decrease as the waste flow decreases. We wouldn't need to build as many holes to bury this waste and so on. And then there's just one more point I want to make, and that is when it comes to requisition, assessed value really is the only fair method of taxation. And that is because it's based on the simple fact that those who have more assets pay a heavier share. That's the way society has always run. You have more, you pay more. You earn a higher wage, you pay bigger taxes. That's the way it works. You have a more valuable house, you pay more. That's the way it should be. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move to Director Davis, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I got to say, I do agree with a number of Director Wally's comments, but getting back to tipping fees, I'm just wondering what information staff has regarding raising tipping fees and its direct effect on illegal dumping in this or other jurisdictions. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. It is difficult to measure for sure. So, you know, we do know that there's a relationship between tipping fees and illegal dumping. You know, there's a threshold at which some people will reconsider going to the landfill, but it is difficult to measure. So, you know, that's really all we can say. So not a lot more on that.
Okay, is there any studies that have been done in other jurisdictions that we could potentially access that could shed some light on this? Because I think it's an important issue. Like I know down in the Victoria region, they had horrible issues with illegal dumping, and I don't know where it's at now because I don't live down there anymore, but I think it's something that's worth exploring. It may be hard to quantify for sure, but I think it's something we should be looking at when we're making these kind of decisions. Thanks.
Yeah, we can definitely bring more information to the roundtable session to dive into that topic a bit more. We've brought a few staff reports to this board in the past on illegal dumping, so we can revisit those and also have a look around at what other regions are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the chair and the CAO. The rationale that was brought in to increase the tax requisition pertained to MFA and our long-term borrowing, because we needed to demonstrate that we had a secure revenue stream coming in order to get the funding we needed for these $69 million waste management plan we had. So that was the rationale behind it. Insofar as some of the stats and comparatives go, ABICC just recently disbanded the Special Committee on Solid Waste, and all the participants in the ABICC area submitted all their baseline data. So all that stuff is available on the ABICC website. Mind you, it's 4 years out of date. It's a pity we couldn't keep it going, because it was a good source of comparative information. Also, I would challenge the fact that the cheaper properties are in the rural area. Just ask Director Arbor how much taxes people pay per capita out there. So, you know, we have a certain obligation to help the rural communities and the remote communities. We have a unified cost on garbage hauling that we all subsidize. Otherwise, it would be horrendous to try to get a truck from Zabalas into Cumberland. So there's a lot of moving pieces. I don't think if we're going to do anything, I think it should be a combination and gradual. As far as affecting behavioral change, that's what churches and governments have been trying to do for years. Good luck with that, you know, but I don't think we need to make it even more onerous for people to bring stuff to landfill. The whole concept behind our job here is to sequester and offer a safe place and for refuse, and it's an environmental issue. So yes, there is an increase in illegal dumping. I think it's all in the reports from ABICC, and we now have a fairly standard across the region, a fairly standard tipping fee schedule. Although some are cheaper, as you can see, but better than it was. So I think we were like $75 or something a ton at the time. So it is a combination, but I would caution against any knee-jerk reactions. Let's get through this budget cycle and we can have a discussion later.
Hey, thank you. Director Wells.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the comments that Director Wally had made about increasing it by the tipping fee, I believe he said by $60 per year. Seems like a shock in terms of a number, but one of the numbers I couldn't see in the report, and I may just be looking past it, but I recall when we met with Minister Hyman about 4 years ago, we had a thing that said, like, this is what the actual tipping cost kind of thing was once you factored in the thing. So what's that total number? Like, I know we have the tipping fee, but if we were to say what the tipping cost is to the regional district, I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have, so I don't have it in front of me. We have developed as part of previous PowerPoint presentations, kind of a pie chart that breaks the service down into recycling, landfills, you know, there's several other categories, and then develops a total cost per ton for the service. So I think that's what you're referring to.
I think so, yeah.
I don't have it in front of me. I don't remember exactly what the number is.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that's the number that we're trying to get to based on what Director Wally was saying. I was just, it would seem like a number that might be useful as part of this conversation, so we know what that number is, and
yeah,
that we're trying to make up for.
It would be something like that number. Yes.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll just refer to Vivian who would provide a little bit more information to answer that question.
Oh, 1 second, please. Sorry, Director Mowini, you'll have to come back.
Thank you. I think the number that you're referencing is the total cost that the service expends to be able to manage each ton of waste. Based on the number that the analysis that we did last year, it was roughly about $276 per ton. But as part of the May roundtable, we're hoping to be able to really dissect that down and do an activity-based costing type analysis to really break down the tip fee, like what the landfilling costs are, the true disposal costs, really segregating each of those the various line items in our GL to be able to really delineate between where each of these costs are going, so that we have a really good, clear picture. And this is this will form part of the more fulsome analysis going into the solid waste management, solid waste management plan, full system analysis report, so that we can really have that fulsome view of how we're going to be able to service not just the capital component of the service, but also the delivery of all of the educational programs that we're going to be really focusing on for the next decade as we venture into that next phase of our solid waste management planning.
That's the one in June.
That will be kind of the first foray. We're not going to get it all done in the next few months, but as we contemplate other programs within our service, we could look at it in a more fulsome manner.
Okay, we're going to move to Director Chapman online, please.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with most of the comments made by Director Wally. One thing I do disagree with is that if we have to have a requisition, I believe it should be done based on a parcel tax. Those who sometimes have more are those who have worked harder to gain it, and I don't think that should be a form of a penalty. If we were to use a parcel tax, if we have to have a requisition, it should be raised by parcel tax. And basically, staff knows what I'm talking about. It's based on a per parcel, no matter the value of the land, so that the outer lying areas are going to be paying an equivalent amount of what people would be paying in Comox and Cam River and Courtney. So I know it's too late to do anything for this year, but I think we should be weaning ourselves off of any kind of a requisition or a parcel tax and relying more on a user fee. In other areas where I've worked, when there was no user fees at all, there's still illegal dumping. So I don't know how you're going to calculate any ratio of user fee versus illegal dumping, because as I said before, in places where I've lived where the tipping fee was zero, there is still illegal dumping. So let's get off the requisition as soon as we can. Let's put it based on the user fee, and so the users pay for what we use. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. We're going to go to still online, Director Thason.
Yeah, thanks. Max Tyson here. I'm the alternate director for Area B, filling Mark Vanesh's shoes. I just wanted to share, I have a small part-time business, extremely part-time, just a couple of weeks a year, doing building, demolition, and recycling, and sell used building materials. I think that's a very distant potential conflict of interest, but just wanted to put it out there for the record. Happy to take any questions on that. But it does give me some very interesting insight into the possibility of, deriving some value from some of our waste streams, and makes me wonder, something that's not clear to me is which of our sort of diversion programs are cost effective. Some of them require funding, which I understand seems to be coming largely from taxation, and which ones sort of pay for themselves by generating a product or a value stream.
Vivian, can I ask you to take that one? Sorry, Vivian. One moment, please. There we go.
Thank you for the question. That is, it's a loaded question, because there are a number of different diversion streams that number of different diversion programs that we operate at our facilities. So things like where possible, we certainly try to go with a full cost recovery model. Say, for example, a mattress, we are currently charging $20 per unit. So that covers the cost of the shredder, the fuel, the operator that runs the material, runs the machines, in order to be able to fully recover that cost. in other areas where there are extended producer responsibility programs where a fee is already paid up, an eco fee is already paid up front, those are paid for by the resident or the business at the point of sale, and it's accepted free of charge at the facilities. So again, where possible, we do try to provide that full cost recovery model, but recognizing that that may not necessarily be possible across the board. There are some programs where we subsidize, but if specific to the construction and demolition conversation, it is definitely one that's following organics. It's definitely the lowest hanging fruit now. We process roughly about 65,000 tons of material per year. That's landfilled. And roughly about 11,000 of that is C&D waste. Mind you, not all of it is recyclable at the moment, but where we certainly want to dive into is where we can divert as much clean wood, possibly looking at pulling out shingles where there are recycling opportunities, not necessarily here on the island, but potentially working with potentially looking at exploring with local partners to be able to see what those opportunities may be. So yeah, it is, it's not, we do strive to do a full cost recovery model, but it's not possible across all diversion programs at this time.
Thank you. Last on the list is Director Mulwiney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the great report. I learned a lot, and I see that the requisition went from $200,000 10 years ago to quite a bit more in 10 years. And it seems to me we are responsible for waste here with very few levers to incentivize decreasing waste. And in fact, tipping fees may be one of the main levers that we have. I question how an across-the-board requisition incentivizes individuals or companies to produce less garbage, and kind of wondering if a high requisition is essentially a subsidy for waste production. I agree with Director Arbour about pushing construction and industrial producers of waste. And I did note that construction waste is so substantive that it merits its own piece of the pie graph. So incentivizing construction to sort and create less waste could have a significant impact on production. And I hope that we can talk about that in June, because that may be a good place to focus our tipping fee increases. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the list is empty. We're going to move on. That was on receipt. So we'll go to all in favor, please. Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Thank you. Second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. And that the 2023-2027 proposed financial plan for the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Service Function 391 be amended to maintain $5 million of taxation revenue all years, and further that the tipping fees be adjusted in years 2024-2027 in order to produce the total requirement revenue as shown in the 2023-2027 proposed financial plan and presented at the January 19th, 2023. And further that, staff bring back details, long-term finances, analysis tipping fees versus taxation scenarios for a presentation of the board in 2023 June roundtable session, and one more. We finally recommend that 2023-2027 operating financial plan of the 2023 to 2032 capital financial plan and the solid waste service function 391 subfunction 392, 393, 394 be brought back to the Comox Draft Waste Management Board for approval at its March 16th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion, please? We did all that? Okay, we did all the vote and everything. You should read it after. I'm going to go slowly this time. Okay, there we go. Number 4. Thank you. Oh, Director Wally has his hand up. Sorry, go ahead, Director Wally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if it's possible to split up some of those motions. I agree with some and disagree with others.
Mr. Chair, the motion was moved, seconded, and voted on already.
Oh,
So-
all right, let it go.
Sorry, Director Wally.
And the next item is the management report, which has been moved and seconded for receipt, I believe. And staff are available to answer any questions if you can highlight the items that you might have questions on.
Okay, we're going to go to Director Greaves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fantastic job so far.
My pleasure. Thank you.
My only question on the management report is, I guess, just a query over the fact that my big initiative is perennially at the bottom of the pile. I think November 14, 2019 was when it was brought up. So I just, if the staff could speak briefly on the application for Recycle BC for a depot south of Campbell River and the north of Area C, because I think I know we've heard the fact that if you're within 30-minute drive, and we're talking drive, folks, behavioral change, that you're not considered to be out of a service area. So obviously people have to either go north to Campbell River or south to Courtney. So I'm just wondering, I think the last time you applied was 2022. Is this something we do like every year, just send in another letter and get turned down again?
And Mr. Chair, I'll ask Vivian Shaw to answer that question for you.
We share your frustration. It is a continual conversation that we have with Recycle BC, and they keep referring back to that drive time, drive distance criteria, which is certainly a sore spot, and it is something that we're continuing to advocate to higher levels of government to amend that standard, which, while it's not actually a regulation by any means, it is one that they constantly use to reference in all of the EPR programs. It's not just Recycle BC, but we did put forward another motion through AVICC to hopefully to be able to garner some more conversation around that. But unfortunately, it is an application that we do make on an annual basis, which unfortunately was shot down last year. In light of this conundrum, we are exploring the Oyster River Depot, even though, again, it is not considered as part of their Recycle BC network. We weren't even able to get it included as part of a satellite depot, which is unfortunate because that means the CSWM is actually having to carry the transportation cost of that material as well as the processing. But we are continuing to have those conversations with Recycle BC just to, again, illustrate that not all communities are created equal, and that we do need that access for our communities. But unfortunately, I don't have anything great to report at this time.
Thank you. H, bylaw and resolutions. Sorry, board and receipt. Everybody in favor? Anybody opposed? Thank you. Sorry, I miss. Okay, bylaws and resolutions. Number 1. Thank you. Second, Director Mulwiney. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Move to second, Mulwiney. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Number 3. Move it. Second. Greaves. Wells. And we have discussion on that. Nope. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. New business, none. Amendment, none. Media questions, none. I'm sorry, does that say termination? No, wait a minute, this is just too fast. We have to back this up a little bit. Point of order. It's my first day, you can't say that. Okay, termination, we have everybody, anybody in favor? Anybody opposed? No? Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for your patience today. You all have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.